Welcome to the pod. You are listening to What the Reality with me, Kasha Roberts, and welcome to another episode of What's the Reality. On What the Reality, this is The Hills Part 2. In Part 1, I talked about The Hills, gave you a refresher of everything that happened. In Part 2, we are dissecting everything, all the storylines that were fake, scripted, and exaggerated, from Lauren and Brody Jenner's relationship to Adrena and Justin Bobby. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to the pod. You are listening to What the Reality with me, Kasha Roberts / watching me. If you are on YouTube, happy Thanksgiving, happy Black Friday, happy Cyber Monday, because that is coming soon. It is super windy where I'm at, so hopefully none of the wind picks up in the mic. But how are you guys doing? Welcome to part 2 of What's the Reality. On What the Reality, we're talking about The Hills. This is the part 2. This is the finale. And we're getting into everything that was fake and scripted. So in part 1, I really talked about the seasons and just like making sure I could jog their memory again, because The Hills was like literally 20 years ago when it was airing. Well, not 20 years ago, but like 2006. I guess that is like 20 years ago. It's about to be 2026. It aired in 2006 and it ended in 2010. So I just wanted to really jog people's memory about like what the show was about. And I was pointing out certain storylines along the way because we're going to be talking about those. But I probably have like the top 20 moments on The Hills that was fake. And shout out to like US Weekly, People, all of the Reddit, the blogs, and even the cast for, at their 10-year anniversary, which was like 2015, I guess it was like 2018, 2019. They kind of did, well, it was technically 2016. A lot of the cast, like Lauren Conrad included, because she's really isolated herself from the cast this now. But, they did have The Hills New Beginnings in like 2021 or whatever. But a lot of the cast, when it hit that decade mark of The Hills airing and premiering, a lot of them were on not the blogs, but in the media outlets talking about what was real, what wasn't fake. So I really did a digest, like a whole deep dive into all of these characters on The Hills, different, fake, exaggerated, scripted storylines. So I separated, like, as you can look forward to in this podcast, in this episode, I separated by, the importance of the people, kind of, which isn't even right, because I think after Lauren, I get into Brody, which, like, on a scale, he isn't. But I break up the what's real and not fake with their names. So with Lauren, I'm going to discuss everything that was real and fake with her, or just fake. I'm really not talking about the real. Like, I might say something every once in a while that's real. And then with Spidey, I just merged them together, Spencer and Heidi. I'm talking about everything that there was fake. And it was a lot for them. Adrena, there's a lot. I don't really talk about Kristen because, like I said, Kristen was on for a hot minute and she came on with one purpose. So we do talk about that. She came on with one intention, one purpose. Brody Jenner does have a section and Lo has a small section. Whitney's section is mostly with Lauren because that was a work friend. But let's hop right into it. This is What's the Reality on What the Reality The Hills Part 2. Starting off with Lauren and all of the fake storylines. I do want to just initially even point out that initially production wasn't even interested in filming Lauren Conrad because, as you guys know, Laguna Beach was so successful. I never watched it, couldn't really get into it. The focus, though, was on Kristen and Stefan, and they really thought to have a successful spinoff, they were going to follow either Kristen or Stefan. There's an interview, I didn't link it, so I don't even know, but I was reading an article or something. A producer was basically like, they were listening to Lauren's life story. You know, she went off to school and then it's like it didn't work out. She wanted to move up to LA. She just sounded like the everyday, relatable girl. And they were like, this is our girl we need to follow towards the hills. And I find that's what's most interesting about the whole Lauren pitch is that they went to her parents first. They didn't even go to her first with the pitch. They went to her parents about, hey, we're thinking about having your daughter star in the spinoff. We want to follow Lauren in her career journey. That's what they really, and you know, producers are messy. That's what they really sold her parents on is we want to follow her career journey. They didn't put any razzle dazzle on any of the other stuff. And that brings me to my next, like, real or fake, because it's like when we first follow Lauren and Heidi to the hills, they are underage and they are caught drinking on camera a lot in the clubs a lot. They are not 21. I think they were like 19, 20 when the hills technically started. But I just thought it was always interesting how the producers, they're like, we have to go to her parents directly so she doesn't even say no. You know what I mean? And they sold her parents on this dream, like, hey, like she's gonna be the biggest like fashion, you know, star, which, you know, some could argue she is, even though her stuff is in Kohl's, like no shade or tea, but it's just like she does have a fashion line. So that did end up working out for her. But you know, they did target her parents first. Like, hey, you can trust us. We're going to take your daughter's story and make her a star. So that's initially where production's head was at before I head into all of Lauren's fake storylines. And like I said, all of the cast have come forward, especially Spencer. Adrena wrote a tell-all book that's actually like really good. Spencer's been very open ever since his crystal journey. And then Lauren, when she does want to talk about the show, she has remained very open about what was real and what was fake. They've all remained very open about how this show was scripted and staged. Even Kristen Cavallari saying how like she would show up on scene and producers would literally tell her what to say. Maybe the first season and the second season wasn't as fake, but as you watch The Hills, and I point this out in my part one, like it's just certain things that, in my opinion, as a reality TV watcher, are just like clear as day, this is clearly fake. Like there's no way this is not fake. So I want to get into some of Lauren's storylines and what was fake. Starting off with the whole infamous Lauren Conrad, Brody Jenner, will they, won't they? So they were never together. This, I don't think this comes as a shock to people or to find out they were never together. They never dated. They literally treated it as acting. They would kiss on screen and then they would be like, all right, see you later, as soon as cameras went down. There was nothing. It was strictly platonic. There's quotes from both of them saying that there was nothing ever romantic there. On the contrary, it's very interesting because Spencer said that, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, but Spencer said that Lauren liked him. And this was an old article, so maybe this is when he was still in his villain era and not his truthful era. But an old article I saw, he was saying everything was fine between him and Lauren and Heidi when she was dating Brody. It's when her and Brody stopped dating is when she started hating Spencer and wanted Heidi to be her wing woman. Like I said, this is pre the new and improved truthful and honest Spencer Pratt that there is. But yes, they never dated. Lauren and Brody have both said it was strictly platonic. It was more so of a friendship vibe. The chemistry was literally exaggerated on the show. And it just shows how much like production and producers edit shows. Because they said there was just certain moments that just never happened, but it was edited to make it happen. The Hills is notorious. You guys really have to go back and watch because there is notorious parts in the show where someone will say something on screen, but I'm just like, when did that happen? They would have them film voiceovers to plug in there to spice up the show. Because I'm like, when did this person say this? Like, you just wouldn't know when they would use your voiceover. So I thought that was really interesting. But this is what Brody said. He said we were always more friends than anything. It was always a blurred, weird relationship. He was always, and then this is what Lauren said, she said, we were always more friends than anything. It was always a blurred, weird relationship. He was always very sweet to me and we enjoyed each other's company. But I think it was one of those things where producers really wanted us to be together and we both knew that we really didn't have that kind of chemistry. But at the same time, we were friends and we were just happy to film together. And then there's this article of US Magazine, Us Magazine, which honestly has been having so many ads. So we do know Brody Jenner's legit exes. Like, you guys, he literally dated Avril Lavigne. Like, that's crazy. Like, he dated Nicole Richie or whatever. But his ex-girlfriends were mentioned. And this was on the Brody Jenner podcast with Dr. Mike Dow. And his ex-girlfriends were mentioned, as someone like said Lauren Conrad, and he said, quote unquote, that's false. Lauren Conrad and I never dated. Lauren and I have always been just friends. We worked together on a show called The Hills where we had to pretend like we were dating, but we never dated. So you have it there. They literally pretended to date. But even when you watch The Hills back, they never were on. They were always off. It was kind of like one of those, like, will they or won't they? Like, it was never a point in time where they were, like, legitimately in a relationship, besides her, like, infamously going off to Paris and then her saying, like, a lot can change. And it was, I feel like you were in Paris for, like, 2 days, at least, like, the episodes we saw. But and then he had a girlfriend or something when they came back. I don't know. The Hills time moves very, very fast. It moves very fast. Another fake storyline for Lauren, I guess. This is like the one that was most interesting to me. Was the whole Bunney situation. So I talked about this in my part 1. I talk about how essentially, Heidi and Spencer were kind of trying to set up Bunney with Brody Jenner, and Jen and Lauren Conrad fell out over this whole thing of her hooking up with Brody, which we can now confirm never happened. So we were always confused why Jen and Lauren actually did fall out if this never actually happened, right? So if you can't remember, listen to part 1. But Elsie, basically, Bunney and her were like friends since they were like 4 years old. Bunney was turning 21. Elsie gifted her like diamonds for her 21st birthday. And it's so funny because like Bunney or as a thank you decided to date Brody, even though she had heard Lauren talking about Brody Jenner to her in the screen, in film, right? But she was a little lit on her birthday. Heidi and Spencer are kind of on the outs with Lauren. And basically like, you should give her Brody. It's depicted as they got together, but now we know that literally did not happen. And yeah, just remember that Heidi was a huge catalyst to that, I always said. But we now know Bunney, I think this was a couple years ago, I want to say like 2022, she's finally like speaking out on that storyline, because I guess like she's known as like, a homewrecker or like a bad friend, because then with that whole Brody thing, an additional what came from that was the fact, remember Lauren and Lo have said that this is kind of her pattern. Like, she does this to her friends. So she was kind of labeled this boyfriend stiller and this bad friend, this woman that intentionally goes after her friends' men. That's why her and Lo had fell out. When in reality, she never even like hooked up with Brody. So I had this from Reddit, and there's screenshots, so bear with me because I am going to read them. But Jen finally like came forward with her story about what really happened. And she was like, it's all so untrue. And I've endured so much manipulation, but kept my mouth shut the entire 15 years, because what will it get me to tell my truth? It was so long ago and so irrelevant to me now. It doesn't serve me. At the same time, does anyone know the producers took me out of my neuroscience final at USC to film that episode because they said it was an emergency to have that discussion and I had to retake the exam. Do you know they told me if I didn't say yes, I'm bad to every untrue thing that was said and have that conversation right then that it was going to be much, much worse for me in the edits. And I had a choice of this or the worst thing. So I left my test. I was having a full blown panic attack during that episode, admitting to things that never once ever happened and getting called evil. So what really happened, the real issue, had to do with someone saying they were recording conversations between people when the cameras were off and were going to show it to producers. That was the quote unquote fight. That's what the quote unquote fight was about. But I had absolutely nothing to do with those recordings. I just happened to be there, and I got blamed for being involved, even though my only contribution was being physically present when it happened. The whole Brody Jenner thing was a total cover up for what really happened, because that's what really happened. They couldn't explain on TV because they missed it on the cameras. They didn't want to break the fourth wall, basically. She said, there you go, folks. If you don't believe me, ask Heidi, Spencer, or Brody Jenner. Now back to my regular programming. And then we do know that Spencer Pratt has confirmed that I have a link to that. But this is more stuff from Jen on her Instagram story. She said there was never a hookup with any other castmates, men, ever, exes, or otherwise, which is falsely stated on that episode. And the whole bit about losing friends to guys is absolutely the most ridiculous thing. I've never ever heard that in my life, because it's never once happened in my entire existence. So there are some lies exposed. And on a Saturday, enjoy at MTV at Adam DeVello can confirm every word. And then she continues. This is the last one. She said, I was told the story had to quote unquote make sense. And the story they made up was that I had betrayed a friend by hooking up with her crush. The whole crew and head cast person went along with this narrative while I was in the dark until the episode aired on national television. This narrative was completely 100% false, asked Brody Jenner. And she asked him again. However, the first episode had aired before I knew what they were doing to me. Now I tried to fix it and made it worse, because I apologized for something that never ever happened. I apologized for everything in their false storyline, because they told me if I didn't, I would make it worse and they would edit it even worse. I couldn't believe that was happening and how I was being accused of so many lies on national television. And of course, they aired it. Second, the issue being discussed was not the issue at all. And so the storyline around my 21st birthday was totally orchestrated. All the girls left together and had a sleepover that evening. But the show made it look like I left everyone and went in a car with someone separately. Hashtag the hills. There you have it. There you have it. She really spilled everything. And I'm pretty sure that's the other thing. Brody or Spencer, I think it's Spencer, 110% backed her story up when she was adding him and stuff. So there were essentially some conversations happening off camera, and someone was recording them on the cast. People have speculated it was Spencer and Heidi. Remember, Spencer and Heidi at this point, though they were acting, not to spoil when I get to them, though they were acting, they were in their prime as mega super villains. So this 110% did happen. And apparently the speculation is that they were the ones that were recording conversations, and they were going to be selling it to Perez Hilton, who was a huge blogger back then. I wonder what Perez is up to, but they were going to sell the conversations to a blogger, and producers got a hold of them, and basically they didn't want to put Spencer and Heidi on punishment because it's Spencer and Heidi, so they let Bunney take the fall, even though she was present for the conversations that were being recorded and filmed. But yeah, so production literally didn't want to break the fourth wall, which is not an issue now when you watch reality TV. Now when we watch reality TV, they're breaking the fourth wall. Portia is saying that Drew is filming her baby daddy. You know, there's nothing that is off limits now, and I like it this way because I'm like, what are we not talking about? And especially makes it more authentic, so I don't really care. But back then, they were like, well, we need to have a storyline and have something cover up. And it's just crazy because, like I said, everything is an edited version, especially the hills. Because I remember that episode, I was like, wow, she literally left with like Brody and them. She said the girls had already left and they went to a sleepover. They left her on her 21st birthday. So I don't know. I will say I don't think her and Lauren are friends. I think they are friendly. But I will say I think Lauren thought bringing on her friend Jim Bunney was going to be an ally in her corner. I think Jim Bunney kind of let like the show get to her head, and she didn't understand the difference between the Hills filming and real life. And I think that's why she got played, essentially. So yeah, let's move on to Lauren in Paris. This was very controversial because, Lisa Love will always be the editor, the Vogue editor that told Lauren, "You will always be known as the girl that did not go to Paris." Well, let's break that down. We see Whitney show up for the airport. We're waiting for Lauren to show up to the airport to go to Paris. Lauren doesn't show up. She's in Malibu with Jason. I hate to say it, that storyline was not fake. That man was actually a substance abuser, alcohol abuser. They were actually in a very toxic, crazy relationship. She actually does go to Malibu and turns down Paris. The gag is, I do think they probably would have went to Paris if she said yes the first time, and now she's obviously known. So the girl, she didn't go to Paris. The thing is, Whitney was supposed to go to Paris. Whitney is seen in season 2 describing how amazing it was, right? Whitney never went to Paris that first time. Okay, so literally, she didn't go to Paris either, even though she showed up ready to go to Paris and it was filmed. That's why I'm like, if Lauren would have showed up to film, I wonder if they actually would have went to Paris. But Whitney literally said she went to the airport all dressed up in season 2, but never went to the Vogue internship. There was no trip, quote unquote. That was so ridiculous. It wasn't an ideal situation, but I thought, okay, this is good for me because I really was pursuing a career in fashion. I thought it showed that I was down and determined to do this. It was very Anne Hathaway as Andy Sachs, from The Devil Wears Prada, except all she got was a trip to the airport to film the scene only to go back home right after. Quote unquote, I got dressed up in an airport look and went for it, and then she returned home. So she didn't even go to Paris the first time. So the infamous, "you will always be known as the girl who didn't go to Paris," well, so will Whitney, because Whitney never even went to Paris the first time. It was filmed to make her look like she went to Paris. Now let's talk about when they actually go to Paris. That blew my head that she actually didn't go to Paris. That was a huge revelation for me. So Lauren in Paris, let's see. So, she gets the opportunity to go to Paris again. And, this is kind of like a whirlwind trip. She meets this guy and, he's a UK guy. Like, I don't know. It seemed very fake to me. Also, like, I think Paris was like 2 or 3 episodes. I don't know how long they were supposed to be there for their internship, but I don't know. Like, it just seemed... let's start with the dress. So she goes out in her dress that the designer lent her for the ball. She goes out because she needs something fancier. And she pins it up, notoriously pins it up. And then she gets back, she meets this guy, gets his number, whatever. They stay in contact. He wants to take her for a ride around on the motorcycle before she goes back to America. Okay, whatever. An American Girl in Paris, Sex and the City's done that before. So now we literally come back to the hotel, and then it's the next day. She needs a dress. She unpins her dress, and there looks like, I thought it was like coffee stains, but also like this is a Paris club, so they're smoking in there. Like they're just doing a lot of stuff, a lot of illegal stuff. I thought it was like a coffee stain or something. Like, so it looked crazy. The dress was burnt. She apparently left the flat iron on. When she unpins it, there's like a burn stain in her dress. I don't know. It looks like a coffee stain. Don't even look like a burn stain. So she infamously texts the designer, or Whitney does this, which I also think was like, why am I in the middle of this? I'm not the one that ruined my dress. They're like, "Oh my gosh, can you get us another dress? Like, we're so sorry. Like this, I can't believe this happened. Whatever. The designer's like, "I don't really have a dress." And he ends up, poof, magic, has a dress. That was fake. There's no way in the real world a designer lends you a dress, you ruin it, and they have another dress for you that on short notice. So that was confirmed to be fake. Lauren said the producers did that to add some drama to the show, add some spin. And it looks like they needed that because they were upset that Lauren did not kiss the guy on the bike. Lauren's whole storyline for going to Paris was obviously career advancement, but to forget about her Hills life. You know, she heard that Brody was talking to someone back home or had a girlfriend. And, you know, that producers like, you need to get over Brody during this Paris trip. They line up a bunch of men. They pick out the man that they want her to fall for. And that's the guy we see that takes her on the motorcycle. So Lauren told US Weekly exclusively that she actually almost got into a huge fight with the Hills producer because they wanted her to kiss that man and she refused to. So, quote unquote, at that point, they had picked out this boy. They had this idea that I needed to fall in love in Paris. So they had picked out this boy who was very nice, but I just wasn't interested. So she didn't even pick this man out. Production did. And they planted him there at the club. In Paris, they wanted me to kiss that boy goodnight. And I got into a huge fight with my producer in the lobby. He was like, you didn't even give him a kiss goodnight. And I was like, I don't like that boy. Why would I kiss him goodnight? I just love how she's like referring to him as that boy. And the producer was like, it would be the perfect ending. And she's like, I'm like, no. And yeah. So that's that. Like the whole Paris thing was so fake, from the dress to Whitney not even going the first time to the man that dropped her off. And you could see some weirdness if you rewatch that episode. Like I feel like he's lingering around to be like, oh, is she going to kiss me? Is she not going to kiss me? She doesn't kiss him. So I thought that was hilarious. Let's talk about something else. Whitney was never Lauren's boss at Teen Vogue. Whitney and Lauren actually never worked at People's Revolution as well. They were very part-time at Teen Vogue, and Teen Vogue knew they had a show to film, and Teen Vogue had agreed to this, just like People's Revolution had, but they were never employed by both of the companies, especially People's Revolution, which we thought. It was more so of an exposure thing for People's Revolution and for Whitney and them, like, which is also another crazy thing. So I think in season 5, Lauren gets Stephanie Pratt an internship with People's Revolution that she doesn't work for. And essentially, Lauren has to fire Stephanie because she's so bad at her job. Kelly Catrone, who's like honestly my spirit animal, has now, since she's gotten into it with Stephanie Pratt, she's gotten into it with a lot of people, but has since now confirmed that Stephanie never even worked there. And the whole purpose of Lauren firing her was for Lauren to get hands-on career experience and HR experience of firing someone if she wanted to be serious in this industry. And I'm gonna try to bring up this phone call between literally Stephanie Pratt and Kelly Catrone, because they go in on each other. Or no, Kelly Catrone just goes in on Stephanie Pratt. Stephanie Pratt's like, you were so mean to me when I started as an intern. And Kelly Catrone is basically like, you were never employed by me. You never got a check from me. She said Lauren never did. Whitney Port never did. She said we were all employed by Viacom, CBS, which obviously owns MTV. She said you never worked for me. So I want to pull up their hashing of words because that was hilarious. Let me bring it up because this is on her podcast.
Like interview to get an internship. But you know the interview wasn't
okay.
Interview to get an internship. But you know the interview wasn't real. It was a fake interview. Like, you know, Lauren didn't work there. Whitney never worked there. And you also never worked there. Even you worked for MTV because they were paying you and you came for an interview that was a fake interview. But we were working there because we spent hours in there filming. Like, filming a TV show. Yeah. Okay, well, for me, it was very real. And when you interviewed me, you basically told me to give up on my dreams.
And I did. Okay. And then I moved to London, and then I tried again. And I succeeded, and I have a clothing line. Okay. But in that interview, you told me that I would never be anything. And I'll never forget that.
I don't think that's what happened in the interview. As a matter of fact, it was a fake interview because none of you, and I'm really happy to throw my payroll from People's Revolution over the last 25 years, none of you, from Whitney to Lauren to you, have ever been on my payroll, which would mean you were never an employee of People's Revolution.
Yeah, internships don't get paid, Kelly.
Well, they do get paid, or you have to be there for college credit. That's actually California labor law. Okay? Let's just be really clear. I haven't seen it lately, but what happened was they were like, Stephanie Pratt's going to come in and you're going to interview her for a job, and you're going to tell Lauren that you don't really want to hire her, but if she wants to hire her, she can. And then Lauren's going to ultimately have to fire her. And in the meantime, here's her resume. And on your resume, it said career goals or something that you wanted to be a handbag designer. And in this, in the interview, I said to you, why would you come to interview for a job at a PR company saying that you want to be a handbag designer?
And then you said, why? So you can steal all my contacts from me and then use them? I'm 22. I was writing a lifetime goal.
Okay, first of all, I hate to be like Buzzkill Betty. Nobody who was ever on the hills was ever an employee of People's Revolution. I, Kelly Catrone, was an employee of Viacom via MTV. Okay? That was a TV show. Lauren Conrad was never my intern. Whitney was never my intern.
No, it just cut out.
I don't know what to tell you.
There we go.
But you were never an employee of mine ever. That's one. Two, I said that if you ever go to interview at a PR company, no self-respecting PR company owner would ever hire somebody whose goal it was to be a handbag designer, because all they would be doing is using the press contacts and the stylist contacts to grow their own brand afterward. And in a non-scripted reality show, I had to say something with you at my desk. It also said that you spoke fluent French, so I spoke to you in French and you didn't speak French back. It was like a TV segment. So if you really, at the end of The Hills, at the wrap, you were like super nice to my daughter. Like she really I had no idea that you actually thought that any of that was real.
Can you listen? Kelly, listen.
Problem. If you didn't know you were on a TV show,
Kelly, it's not about being on a TV show. It's about how you treat a young woman when they say what they want to do.
Really good try.
Oh my God. Kelly, you're talking about your books and your career, enough.
But Steph, is there any chance that because Kelly was tough, that it did motivate you?
No.
It doesn't matter.
I stopped going to fit him.
TV show.
I stopped going to fit him. I gave up on my handbags. And you know what? From Abby, one of the crew members, I still have it on my fridge. She made me a card and cut out all these handbags and a little Stephanie and wrote CEO handbag designer because I was so upset. It's still on my fridge.
Well, I don't really know what
to say. Just say sorry.
I'm not sorry because I didn't do it.
All right, Kelly.
Listen, I get where Kelly's coming from. That she knew was...
So yeah, they had a huge miscommunication, and I think Stephanie is confused with being employed by MTV versus being employed at People's Revolution. And I think Kelly was just trying to give her some advice too, but she's like, you don't work here, but also if you are submitting a resume to me, as a PR company outside of the show, why would your career goal be to be a handbag designer? Because now I'm thinking you're just going to use me for my press contacts. I think she was just using that as a tough love moment. Just hey, by the way, though this is all fake, you should know before applying to a PR company, don't submit that you want to be this designer, because then people are going to just think you're taking their contacts. And that's that. I like Kelly. She is no nonsense. And she actually went on to have her own reality show. It was only one season. It was called to Kel or something, Kel and back or something, like, you know, Kelly Hell or whatever. So it was a spinoff of that. I can't remember what it was called. But other things that were fake in Lauren's storyline before we wrap it up, for Lauren at least, which is like the most fake storylines, is that Lauren is seen as being sad at Spidey's wedding. Yeah, she actually wasn't sad that they were getting married. She was actually very angry and pissed off because the producers had locked her in a closet in the church basement, and the wedding was delayed like over 2 hours. What did she say? She said something to Glamour. This is the real reason she was upset. So the wedding was supposed to start and it got delayed 2 hours, and she actually was dating someone at the time and they had to be somewhere. So it was not her real life at that point. So she said, quote unquote, at that point, this wasn't my real life anymore. And I left out of the church's side door. So that's why the final scene, I'm not leaving with everyone else. I'm taking a side exit out because I had a car waiting and I needed to leave. And yeah, they locked her in the basement with a security guard so she wouldn't leave because she was already trying to leave because they were already late somewhere. And they locked her in the basement of the church with a security guard and they made her not leave. So she was really upset that production had did that. Something else that I thought was very interesting was that the final phone call she did receive from Spencer about him apologizing for the sex tape rumors, all of that stuff, you know, him really trying to get her to come to the wedding. That was fake. Lauren has said that she was not on the other side of that phone call, which I think is also crazy. So this is like, I found this on like a blog, and according to Conrad, Spencer Pratt never apologized for spreading false sex tape rumors, which did end up being true. He did actually go to Perez Hilton with all of that stuff. Quote unquote, to be perfectly honest, I wasn't on the other end of that call. They clipped it to make it seem like she was the one on that call. She said that was filmed and I wasn't on the other end. And then, okay. And then she said, I apologize because this is what got. So Spencer said, I apologize because this is what got Conrad to our wedding. I said, I'm sorry because Conrad said, I will come to the wedding if you say I'm sorry for something I didn't even do. And The View said, you never spread those rumors. And he said, absolutely not. It was not a rumor. It was a fact. Ooh. He said it was a fact. I didn't even know about it until afterwards. So no, I didn't get an apology. He's lying. So there was some back and forth between that. Like I said, I thought that was interesting. Let's move on to Brody. So what a lot of people don't know, we don't meet Jade, Brody's infamous playmate girlfriend who looks like the Jade Bratz doll. We don't meet Jade until season 5, season 6. They're on and off. Little do you know, they were together. That was his like main girlfriend majority of the time filming The Hills in general. That's who he was on and off with majority of the time until they brought her onto the show. He was already dating Jade for a minute, and they didn't actually break it off until 2009, which is when we do see them break up when they're filming. But that was like they had been dating for a minute while he was dating Lauren. And you know, the whole Kristen, him and Jay situation was also fake. Kristen has admitted she was literally hired onto The Hills to come in replace of Elsie. Ooh. The internet. Okay. It was like my internet went out. Kristen was specifically brought onto the show to cause up drama. She was literally hired because of that. But yeah, Kristen and Brody, which is another interesting thing, they actually did date, but they never dated on The Hills. So they actually dated and this is going to lead me into Spidey because I didn't have that much for Brody, but they actually dated when they were like 18. And Brody was actually on a reality show, and it was called The Princes of Malibu. And this is with his brother, Brandon Jenner. And this is also with David Foster and Linda Thompson while they were together. This is early, I think it was on Fox. And guess who produced it? Spencer Pratt. Spencer Pratt was the producer of that show. Therefore, Spencer coming into the hills knowing Brody Jenner, the fourth wall, they can't break it. Oh, I was a producer on his show that he just was on that didn't even make the, what is the saying? It didn't even come to light as day because it was so, like, it wasn't even talked about that show. They come on the hills together as friends when really, how did they know each other? I was his producer. Spencer wanted to be a producer. Spencer loved TV stuff. So him coming into the hills was really an acting role for him because he had always been a producer. So he was totally fine leaning into the villain role. So when you watch the Malibu Princess, where if you can watch it anywhere, you could probably catch some clips on YouTube. Um, you That's the era where Kristen and Brody dated. They were super young. They were 18. They never dated while The Hills was airing, but they knew each other. They were good friends, but they never even, I don't even think, like, took it to like third base for the sake of this show. I'm not gonna say, like, even though I cuss. I think they never even hooked up. They said they just kissed. Like, they weren't even, it was a very brief dating period, to say the least. So that brings us to the most, like, fake stuff of Spencer and Heidi. Unfortunately, the only real thing I think that Spencer and Heidi have brought to the show was her surgery reveal to her mother, which was genuinely shocking for her mom to see. I think the cast had already seen her or heard about it, like, so that wasn't a big shock. But the only true, authentic, raw moment we got wasn't until season 6. They were only on season 6 for like 4 episodes. The only true, authentic moment we got is when she revealed what her body and face looked like to her mom, and her mom's like breaking down crying. So yeah, with Spencer being a previous producer, he really revelated, or really cultivated in his role as a villain. He was fine with being a villain. He didn't have an issue with it. I'm trying to see if it's starting to snow. Like, it looks like it's starting to snow. Great. So some of the things that were fake. Spencer never kicked Holly out of the apartment. Remember, this is season 4 or season 3. Holly is Heidi's sister, and she comes, but to stay and visit them from Colorado, but she also kind of wants to move out to LA. So the gag is he never actually kicked her out. Actually, they never lived there. They never lived in that apartment. And Holly actually lived in that apartment building, so they never kicked her out. Another thing, I don't know if you guys remember when he confitied the wall, that was also fake. And he never did that. He hired someone to do that. The landlord did not know that was happening, which is shocking. And the landlord actually was not allowed to enter their room, like, while they were filming, or like for filming purposes, like, no matter what they heard. So I thought that was another thing. But, like, yes, they did confetti the wall, but, like, Spencer technically didn't. Like, he paid someone to do it, and then they just painted over it. So I don't even think the landlord knew, unless they watched the show, that there was confetti underneath the paint. Most of Heidi and Spencer's fights were staged, and I have an article talking about this. Yeah, they said most of their fights were literally fake. Okay, so Spencer's sister Stephanie said in an interview that the couple actually didn't have any of those hectic fights in real life. They looked at it as a job. They were making millions every season. No one wanted to see them happy. In 10 years, I've never seen them actually even fight like that. And I think even Heidi and Spencer have confirmed that. They literally viewed it as acting gigs. Like, they said they never even got into it like that. Heidi also never worked for Bolt House Productions as, like, an event planner or whatever, nightclub planner, and she never got promoted over Elodie. I remember watching that. I was like, this is so fake. And then not Elodie, saying, "Oh yeah, I'll cover this event for you," and never show up because she put her 2 weeks in. I did some stalking. I found Elodie on like LinkedIn and stuff, but she's living in Phoenix now. Like she's living a good life. She's still in corporate, but the gag is Heidi never worked there and she never got promoted, and Elodie actually worked there, so it was just off for the storyline, um which is just so funny. She had to pretend to work at Bolt House. But what I will say, because when Heidi and Lauren first get to the hills, they're clubbing and stuff, I think at one point she did work at Bolt House, but not at that point. I think it was maybe brief when she did get a job there. And the only reason she got the job is because they wanted like to fill the clubs up with younger people. They didn't care if they were underage or not, and that's a lot about club culture. And it was easier for her to get on these venues and events and stuff being a Hills cast member, but also technically working at Bolt House, even though she didn't really work there. So I thought that was interesting. What I will say before getting into Adrina's package is Adrina actually did work the receptionist job, and she did go on to kind of work for like the records label. I can't remember. I think it was Epic Records or something. I think she did have a similar role, like a part-time role, and she was actually interested in that stuff. But we'll get into Adrina's placement and everything because it's a lot. Well, not that much, but it's just like it's very interesting. Some other stuff that was fake for Spencer and Heidi. They were never living in that big house. I think anyone knows they were never living in that big house. That was season 6 or the other half of season 5 after they get married. Also, she never got baby fever. She says that she would never trick Spencer into that. And I thought another interesting storyline for Spencer and Heidi that Spencer has now like deemed as totally like creepy and like just weird to start off is that she never even had a pregnancy scare, and that was in season 2 when they first started dating. And Spencer's been very open. Like I said, he's on his healing journey, as Whitney Rose would say, and he is really into the crystals and stuff. He's a very better version of himself today than he was then, so that's why like his newer stuff I genuinely believe. But I'm trying to go to, I wonder if I can bring up the TikTok at, because he posted some TikTok, but going from the one like baby making. So once they get married, they move into that house, which was never theirs. It was actually the child actor's home, which they were staying in. Enzo, I always thought that storyline was weird. But in terms of like trying to baby trap him in season 5 or 6, whatever it was, Heidi said, yeah, I would never do that. I think that's the worst thing any human could do. I don't like tricking or manipulating people or things like that. I think that's a really important step. And I was way too young. I wasn't even thinking about kids then. But in terms of the pregnancy scare, where is it at? Because I know it literally talks about it. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe I clicked the wrong link. I think I clicked the wrong one. But like, where is it at? Oh, here it is. Sorry, guys. Normally I have my links up because I'm like, wait, he said something. He did one of those split screen or those overlays where he's like watching it. It was a TikTok video. This was like literally in 2022. He called the producer like very creepy. The fact that he would even go on with this storyline. He's talking about Adam DeVillo. I don't know if any of them are cool with this man, who is now producing the Selling the Sunset, Selling the OC, Selling the City. Like he's in charge of that stuff on Netflix, which is why it's so freaking fake, as I say that into my mic. So this is what Spencer said. He said, quote unquote, I think, of course I gotta add, of course, he said, I think it's shady some old men asked a young girl to fake this. And it was a video of when they're meeting in the car and she's like telling him like, I don't know if I didn't get my period, like I took a pregnancy test. Like it was so like, oh my gosh, is she pregnant? Is she not pregnant? He said Adam DeVillo, the producer, is as creepy as it gets. Is as creepy as creepy gets. This was all set up. We got these 40-year-old plus men asking a 20-year-old, maybe 21-year-old woman to go pretend like she thinks she's pregnant with a guy that's already making her look bad. And then he said, I'm furious about this. I can't believe they played her out like that. They were like, okay, we have a really great idea for you. Like, they just gave me the lead role in Twilight or something. And guess what? I was excited to get more screen time. So I was like, whatever, sure, who cares? Yeah, and then he said, this is just so shady. The thing about this is that it was all staged. Heidi didn't even think she was pregnant. I'm smiling because I'm watching her acting abilities. Because when you watch that scene, he's like smiling at her. Like, she didn't even think she was pregnant. He continued, it's creepy to me. And yeah, he just said, like, what 40-year-old producer would make this wasn't, I think they really thought they were filming a sitcom, the producers. Like, they were like, okay, we need to spice it up. If this episode's too dry, we about to add in something that's totally fake and made up. Whatever. But yeah, like I said, perhaps I think Heidi and Spencer got guilty of like doing a lot of stuff fake for the cameras. And they knew that because they wanted more airtime. They wanted more money. They wanted to be in every episode. Every episode you're in, you get signed on for like the seasons. So it's like every single episode that you're in is what you get paid for. And, Spencer was very new season 2. He had became a series regular by season 3. So he was like, hey, I'm down to do anything. But I will say perhaps the most honest thing they've done was capture Heidi's mom's reaction to her facial reconstruction and surgery, the 10 surgeries she had in a day. Moving on to Adrena and all of her storylines. The biggest one I think is like Justin did not leave Adrena on the beach. I think this is like season 2 or 3. The original plan was for Justin and Adrena to drive off together. That's why he had brought her a helmet. And that's why he also showed up in combat boots. Like, people were like, oh my gosh, why did he show up in combat boots? He did not know they were about to film on the beach, but he knew they needed him to film for something. And Adrena was going to be there. So he's like, let me get her a helmet. Production decides to film a scene of just the helmet alone, like, a solo shot and him driving off, so they could edit it to make it look like he literally just left her. He did not leave her. They actually drove back together. Everything was fine. It is just crazy how they edited that. And he said he got some flack for that. And he's like, that's crazy because it never happened that way. But what I will say about Adrena and Justin before I get into the next one is that they were never in a official relationship. However, you cannot deny their chemistry. They were very on and off. And even in The Hills New Beginnings, she said, or she alluded that like they have kept in touch, and like their flirty companionship, friendship helped her get through her divorce with the Corey guy. Which brings me to the next thing that was fake. Justin and Kristen never dated. Now, did Kristen admit that there was like a flirty vibe, like not really knowing this man, like, but was like excited to film with him? Yes, but they never dated. And the gag is Adrena got into it with production because they wanted Adrena and Kristen to fight over Justin, but during season 5, season 6, whenever this fight happens, Adrena's actually with Corey, her now ex-husband, who she has a daughter with. So, like, she wasn't really even pressed about Justin. She was not interested in him. That was not her real life. And like I said, we had seen Corey throughout The Hills a couple of times, but she really was not pressed about him. But I have this clip from Kristen talking essentially about how she never, dated him like at all. I'm like looking for it. And she confirmed they never dated.
I never really dated Justin Bobby. I literally never saw him outside of filming. I didn't know the whole backstory with Justin and Audrina. So when Justin tells me that they were never even fully together, I take that at face value. So we're talking about his motorcycle. I tell him I've never been on one. And he says he's going to take me out on his motorcycle. So then there's a line from me where you don't see my mouth moving. And I'm like, I don't know, Justin, are you asking me out? Well, that's a wild line. He didn't actually ask me out there. And he goes, I don't know. I'm trying to be good. Also a wild line. I would never say that I dated Justin. There is an underlying flirtation, and that is real. And even when I watched it back, I found myself smiling. I was like, what am I doing? I was like invested in the relationship. So I don't want to say there was zero there. There was clearly something, like there was a flirtation happening.
So yeah, that's that. I mean, a lot of the times the chemistry we see on these reality shows on the hills, these people wouldn't even hang out once cameras went down. They were literally there to film a show. And that brings me to Adrina's entering into the group. You know, it's set up, it's plopped up that she met Lauren and Heidi at the pool, just chilling by the pool. When Adrina, out of all of the cast, like being brought in from XYZ, Adrina was probably the only one that the producers set out in salt. So they saw her at the pool, chilling by the pool by her friends, and they were like, hey, do you want to be on this reality show, The Hills? And she's like, sure. She did not know it was Lauren Conrad and Heidi, because she actually did watch the Laguna Beach. So she had knew who Lauren Conrad was. So they saw her in the apartment. She had to avoid the pool in the lobby for like 2 weeks straight. She could not be there. They were patrolling her. They were making sure she would not meet Heidi and Lauren. And then they had made it so she would be at the pool when Heidi was there, so they could meet organically for the first time on camera. So that was organic. But I will say about Adrina, she was actually cast on The Hills. And I say that versus, like, you know, Lauren and Heidi clearly were, but like Whitney Port was cast as Lauren's coworker. Adrina was supposed to be cast as Heidi's friend, but no, she's their roommate. She's their apartment neighbor. So she was specifically cast to also be on The Hills. And she was already, these are LA transplants. She was already from LA. She gave that rocker, edgy, early 2K vibe, the cool girl vibe, and that's what they were really needing. So they really pitched the show, you know, with her being on there and, you know, this cool girl. So I thought that was also interesting. But moving on to kind of like Adrina and Justin Bobby, they never really like got it right. They never really got it together. And Justin even said that they were never in a legit relationship. Um, and he knows that The Hills was strictly for entertainment purposes, while Adrina said like they were just kind of always in limbo. I have this link for her that I want to read, this quote that she was talking about Justin Bobby, just essentially saying like he was always there for her and like he really did help her, but like they just never could get it together. And they were so young. They were very young. Like I said, she talks about a lot of this in her memoir and stuff, but they never even had a solid on period. So let me see. Let me see when it says it. Like, where are all my quotes going? I think she said it here. Okay, so Justin, this is an interview that Justin did. He said, were we like boyfriend, girlfriend? No, we weren't. We worked a lot. We had some moments. We spent a lot of time together. It never evolved into anything too heavy, but we definitely went through an experience of doing TV and filming and traveling and having lives. And she's still a dear friend to this day. I was going to say, they're still friends to this day, like 2025. Adrina is engaged right now to someone. I can't remember his name, but they have remained friends throughout this whole process, which makes me always wonder, like, why couldn't they get it right? Because I always thought like they were going to be endgame. And then Adrina said that we started hanging out and got to that weird what are we point. He filmed bits for the first season doing my hair because Justin was initially like a hairdresser. He still is a hairdresser, like a celebrity stylist. But they never made it to air because he wasn't really into it. We kept in touch and were together, but not together, if that makes sense. It was a confusingly interesting time, to say the least. We had a real connection and love for each other, but we were both also very young. And that's what I'm saying. Like, they just really could never, just get it right. And another person that could never get it right, I think people are shocked to know that, honestly, Adrina and Lo actually got along at one point. You know who didn't get along was Adrena and Lauren, they were strictly work friends. That's why Adrena to this day is really close with Heidi and Spencer. Them, they even when they moved in together, they were just strictly roommates for filming. They realized they were filming a reality show. Adrena in her tell-all books has said that her and Lauren, they just never could get it right as genuine friends. It was very like work type, which is fine. You know what I mean? It's like a coworker. But she also said she described Lauren as very controlling in her friendships, and she just realized she could not be friends with someone like that. And I thought it was interesting because she compared it to the whole Heidi in Lauren whole debacle. And I talked about that in part one, how I was like watching it back, like I like Lauren Conrad. I kind of see myself in Lauren Conrad, but she is very controlling of her friendship. So it's like you can have this terrible relationship with Jason, but you judge Heidi for being with Spencer. And this is even before the sex tape rumors. Like you wasn't still really feeling him. And then another revelation, which is why Adrena thought the rumor was so true about Justin and Lauren, is because when cameras would go down, Lauren would be flirty and stuff with Justin, and she actually introduced Justin to her mom or something. Like, so it wasn't far-fetched for her to believe, but we do know a producer, or Lauren has confirmed, someone confirmed a producer literally went to Adrena's friend to hype that up. And the only reason Adrena believed it is because she's like, wait, you actually don't hate him though. So like, did you hook up with him? Because she was like, it was believable. It was easy for her to believe that. But on the grand scheme of things, like Lauren and Adrena, they weren't ever really friends. So there really wasn't any love lost there, especially when the mascara is coming down from Lauren's eye and she's crying about the breakdown of their friendship. Like there was no real love lost there because they already knew they weren't really friends, kind of. You know what I mean? So I think I was shocked about that. I was also shocked to kind of just know that Lo and Adrena were actually cool. And I'm going to get to Lo's quick thing real quick. But obviously, another big one, I feel like people know, Adrena and Spencer never dated. Adrena said, oh God, no, I did not have history with him. And this was one of the things that really upset me. And this was when I started distrusting the producers. She said, recounting a time when they asked her to show up at Pinkberry Frozen Yogurt Shop without explanation, only to have Pratt, who eventually showed up, and I remember that, and he was like flirting with her or whatever, but she said they never dated. Which is, yeah, and I think that was in season 2 when her and Heidi had fallen out because Heidi and Spencer were dating at that point. But it just goes to show how much. In terms of Kristen, like I said, they never dated. Her and Brody, her and Justin never dated. They just had that. And then Kristen has confirmed she was literally hired, like I said, to just literally come in the place of Lauren Conrad and basically play a bitch. Like that's literally what her storyline and her purpose was on the show. And I had what she was talking about on Watch Happens Live. She went on Andy Cohen, Watch Happens Live, and I'm gonna say what she said. She said she was literally acting on the hills. This is from 2020, I think. Okay, so she said, so Andy was like, did they tell you what to say and stuff? And she said pretty much, she said fake relationships, fake fights, but it was fun because you're acting, and that was more fun for me. Like I said, Kristen only swooped in because I think she thought this is going to lead her to serious acting gigs. Because I think everyone at this point in Hollywood knew like The Hills was fake. Also, guys, towards the end of The Hills' demise, there is a golden tan child on MTV, and it's called Jersey Shore. And Jersey Shore honestly became more high rated. So you got the East Coast versus the West Coast. You got, the Botox versus the drunk on the beach. So like Jersey Shore became a phenomenon. I'm gonna do a breakdown on Jersey Shore as well. Jersey Shore was not fake, but I do think it'll be interesting to do a breakdown in some capacity of Jersey Shore in general as a reality show, because a lot of people forget about that. That was a pop culture phenomenon, and people were tanned. That's coined the phrase juice heads or meat heads. I mean, juice heads, meatballs, like a lot of Italian lingo. They were The Hills' serious competitor. But back to Kristen, she just said how, wait, no. Okay. She said Okay. So yeah, she said it was fun because you're acting and that was more fun. So in regards to the comrade stuff, like, was there serious beef? That is like the ultimate last question of what's real and what's fake. Cavallari said, I feel like they put things in our heads. She says, we were 17 and 18 and they made it a lot worse than what it was. So Kristen and Lauren have been on a podcast now together about the Hills, things being fake, even with Stefan, deading that stuff. I think Kristen, out of both of them, enjoys to shade her every once in a while, but they know their drama was never that deep. They were just teens who didn't like each other because they were both obsessed with the same man, but it was never blown out of proportion how much it was shown on the Hills, and like how she saw Kristen in the corner. I just explained how Lauren had somewhere to be at that wedding. She's not like she saw Kristen in the corner and she's like, I gotta sneak out of here. I can't be here. There's no way we both can coexist. And it's like Kristen swooping in and like, narrating the day away, which honestly I feel like they should have used Brody or Adrena to kind of pass the baton. But and so Jana had like a very, like, she's had a lot of interesting stuff going on. Like, I didn't feel like it was necessary for Kristen to even come in. Like, she were on for like one season. Like, it just, the Hills went out so bad for me. But the finale was perfect, how they like brought up the Hill sign, and that was that. But there was never really any serious beef with like Lauren and Kristen. It was just kind of like, oh my gosh, we're two girls. You got that high school person, you're just kind of like, I don't like you. But it's like not that deep. It's like I see it. It's like, okay, cool. It's like just two people misunderstanding. I think that's everything. And then the biggest thing, and not the biggest thing, but in terms of Low recently was, well, not recently. I think what year is this? Well, yeah, recently. This was 2024. Low talks about her kind of portrayal on the show, and her and Lauren Conrad being like deemed these bullies to Adrena. And she said, quote unquote, the season of The Hills where Adrena and I were at odds. When they shot that season, I had no idea that we were at odds. I thought we were friends, and then the edit came out, and the edit was not very flattering edit of me. And then Adrena essentially got in her feelings, and they weren't cool anymore. And so then she said that editors a lot of times would voice things together with voiceovers, and then they would use clips of Low staring off into space to make her look like she was disinterested or not friendly towards Adrena. And then she said, you don't know going into these shows when you're young that they already have the entire season mapped out on a wall with post-it notes of the entire storyline with the arcs, and the person's going to do this and this person's going to do that. Yeah. But she said on our show, they would basically have us sit down for a scene. They would shoot it, and then they would reposition the cameras, and then they would shoot it 5 to 6 more times. So they would have them shoot the same scenes 5 to 6 times just so they can get the perfect angle. I don't know why they didn't just have like several cameras, but yeah, they would make them like reshoot things. And that's another thing Adrena admitted to. She was like, the Hills, a lot of stuff was scripted, but she said a lot of stuff did happen off camera. And once producers heard of something or a fight or some miscommunication happening off camera, they would make them sit down and film it to get it on camera. So do with that what you will. Low continued, they were doing it so ultimately that they could get the cut they wanted to fit the narrative, when she's talking about like filming the cameras, different shots. And then she said, I think unfortunately for her, that created a sense of, we must not be friends in real life. The season in real life, we were totally friends, and the show comes out and it changes your real life relationship, which happens a lot in Housewives as well. Like, it's like you see stuff in confessionals. Oh my gosh, could you imagine if the Hills had confessionals? You see stuff in confessionals, and by the time you get to the reunion, because the Hills never have reunions, by the time you get to the reunion for Housewives and these other reality shows, it's like, I thought we were cool, I guess not, when it's like we already hashed this out, and now you're reliving it, watching it on TV, and now we're back in a negative space. So I think that's what Lo was ultimately saying. That's everything that was real and fake on the Hills. I hope you enjoyed it. I don't know what topic I'm going to do next, or if I'm going to go back to Housewives. I'm going to take some time to see. Definitely going to have another topic before the end of the year, because why not? Or I'll update you if I do. I'm excited though. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to The Hills Part 1 and Part 2. I will see you for Toxic Tuesday. Eat some turkey. or not, because I'm not a turkey person. Eat some chicken. And yes, happy holidays. And I will see you guys for Toxic Tuesday.